Hi, we're here with Donna Shalala, the Democratic nominee for U.S. Congress, District 27. Welcome, Donna.
Thank you very much.
So I'm Kathy Andersen, the Executive Director of the Women's Fund Miami-Dade, and this is our lunchtime live stream with Donna. What's in it for women 2018, with the election only 5 days away, Donna?
It's a pretty exciting time, but for women, everything's at stake. It's not just reproductive health, it's childcare, it's flex time, it's family leave. It's all the things that affect women in their families, and that's what it's at stake. I've made some proposals, like doubling the earned income tax credit that will help poor women to lift their families out of poverty. I also know that all of the healthcare issues, not just women's reproductive health, but all of the issues of child-centered healthcare, family-centered healthcare, are of interest and importance to women. This administration wants to cut out pre-existing conditions. They're challenging the requirement in the Affordable Care Act that every insurance plan has to cover pre-existing conditions. Frankly, if you don't cover pre-existing conditions, you don't have insurance.
Right. Yeah, and their health is obviously one of the big issues, along with immigration, for this election. And in particular, you know, stepping back to the bigger picture, many would say that these midterm elections are the most significant in almost recent history, because this is not just about shaping the policy of our nation, it's about shaping the persona of our nation.
It's really about the character of America and what we stand for.
Right.
Whether we continue to stand for taking care of the most vulnerable in our society, whether we believe in equity and in justice and treating men and women equally, whether we believe that where a child and to whom they're born, whether they have the same opportunities, that justice ought not to depend on your family's income or where they came from or what languages they speak or where they live in this country. So the fundamentals that shape the American character are really at stake here.
Right, and really what we've seen, and it's almost impossible to talk about the election without really talking about and recognizing what's happened over the last week. The bombs sent to leaders of our country, the massacre of elders in our synagogue, the divisive and hateful speech that we see, and the Anti-Defamation League referencing that 57%, there's been an increase of 57% of anti-Semitic incidents over the last year, the highest year-on-year increase. And so this is not only about the person, it's about the party. It's about changing the narrative and setting a high standard. So why Donna and why the Democrats?
Because we stand for all the values that represent the United States of America. Because we want positive change. Because we want to move forward. We want to make sure that every child has equal opportunity. That every woman, no matter what job she takes, is treated equally with the men in their job site. That we want to make sure this country is respected around the world, and we want to make sure that the future of the country is in the hands of those who care about the entire country, not about certain groups, and that they understand that we're a nation of immigrants. We understand that. Immigrants have built this country. My grandparents who came from Lebanon, my cousins who came from Cuba and from Brazil, all of them have played a role in building this country and fighting for it to preserve freedom.
Right, and we just heard on Tuesday night the president say that he was going to scrap Amendment 14 by executive order, birthright citizenship, and that has struck fear in people, especially amidst immigration, because it's a way that people see power bypassing Congress. And so tell us about immigration, because there's a lot of fear around it. What are your policies around immigration, and what's in it for women and families based upon your immigration policies?
Well, let me say this. It's scary when the President of the United States doesn't know the Constitution of the United States. The 14th Amendment clearly says that children born of non-citizen parents on American soil are Americans. So he cannot, by executive order, both Republicans and Democrats have said this publicly, he cannot, by executive order, change the Constitution. There's a whole process for changing the Constitution. My opponent, for instance, suggested we review it. We don't need to review it. The constitutional scholars who represent both parties have said it is very clear and very firm American policy in the Constitution. My position on immigration is that we ought to find a pathway to citizenship for those who are currently here. There are 11 million people, DACA students, many others, some under temporary protective status who have been here for 20 years. We ought to find a pathway to citizenship for them. We also ought to have secure borders and a reasonable immigration policy. But it cannot be a policy in only white Europeans who have high skill levels are allowed to come into this country. The president wants to exclude people who are brown or black or Muslim, people who don't look like traditional European Christians. That's not American. It's un-American. It's immoral for a president to make those kinds of suggestions. So my policies, I would extend TPS to the Venezuelans and to the Nicaraguans. They clearly cannot go home. And simultaneously, let's find a pathway to citizenship. After all, it was Ronald Reagan who declared amnesty and started us on the pathway for citizenship for immigrants that are currently here. We don't need large numbers of people who aren't on a pathway to citizenship, aren't becoming citizens living in this country. They need to be able to have a stake in the future. They need to live without fear. And that may be the most important thing. Let me tell you a story. My grandmother, turn of the last century, was turned away at Ellis Island. She came here from Lebanon. Turned away at Ellis Island. Her mother took her all the way around. She snuck across the Mexican border. For 50 years, she lived in this country in fear. We didn't find out this story until my mother was driving her to Social Security to have her sign up at 65, and she burst into tears. We found a way for her to become a citizen. At that time, elderly people in her situation could simply be interviewed and they would get their citizenship. Today, Donald Trump would send her away, and I wouldn't be here. But so this citizenship issue affects me and my family. She was a good citizen all of her life. She never broke the law, but she was fearful during all those years and never told the family what the circumstances were.
Right, right. And there's many people watching now who are in fear, and they need policy, they need confidence that the representatives that represent them will look out for their best interest.
And look out for the best interests of the United States.
Right.
It is in our interest. Full program that Hillary Clinton and I put together, the Children's Health Insurance Program. That's dangerous to all of us. So we have to settle this. But at the same time, Democrats have to be for strong borders, orderly immigration policies.
Right. Okay, so let's actually segue to health now then. Can you share again what's in it for women especially and families for health? What are your specific policies that women who are watching today can say, I understand what Donna Shalala is going to do for me and my children and my family when it comes to health?
First of all, I'm for reproductive health, and that includes family planning. This administration is cutting out family planning money. You can debate the abortion issue. I am pro-choice, strongly pro-choice, but debating family planning is ridiculous. So they're pulling money out of Planned Parenthood, which provides services for women. For a huge percentage of the poor women in this country get their health care services out of Planned Parenthood clinics. So it's in essence an anti-woman policy. I believe in universal health care. Medicare for all, which everybody talks about, is one strategy for universal health care. I would prefer not to spend all that money right on. For people that have good health insurance, they ought to be able to keep it. For people that don't, we ought to make sure that we've extended Medicaid, Health Care Act, the ACA, available to everybody else. We ought to let people buy into Medicaid or buy into Medicare, but we've got to get everybody covered, and they've got to have pre-existing condition covered. And it has to cover the full range of women's health.
And so, for women, if the policies that you're talking about are not implemented,
is we have more contracting out and more people in this gig economy that are working one or two jobs. So we've got to think much more creatively. We've always tied these things to your employer, and it could be in the future that we ought to think about a more mobile set of benefits that are tied to the individual. Now, here we are.
Okay, here we are again. There you go. Okay, so we were talking about jobs, the economy, we were talking about minimum wage for women and changing things like family leave and child care.
Yeah. I just think these things increasingly ought to be tied to the individual as opposed to just tied to the job. So we've got to figure out a way to do that. It has to be more mobile. And it's not just retirement benefits that need to be mobile. Child care needs to be mobile. Family leave needs to be mobile. Sick leave needs to be mobile. It needs to be attached to the individual. That's the new way to thinking about the new job and the new economy. And we're not there yet, but people in Europe are experimenting with this. And I think it's going to come to the United States. Those of us that are professors in this country, we have a mobile benefit plan. It's called TIA-CREF. Whatever university I have taught at in my career, and I've taught at 6, I think, I've been able to take my mobile benefit, the TIA-CREF plan, with me wherever I've gone. So I've had one retirement benefit.
Right, right. And so then with the woman that is trying to get by on 20 hours a week on minimum wage, support their child, what can you say to that woman with regard to how your policies will help them? And again, what's at risk if your opponent party is successful?
Well, first of all, they don't believe in $15 an hour wage, but more importantly, they don't believe in doubling the earned income tax credit. For that woman, the earned income tax credit is absolutely critical because it will give her actual cash and raise the floor for her. And the fact that she works, it will be attached to that. So she'll be able to get some cash at the end of the year. Second, she needs affordable child care. She needs free child care. She can enroll her child in a Head Start program or in some states in a free program for child care and for after school care as well. So she needs transportation benefits. She needs affordable housing. We need to build a package, a wrap around package of services for her.
Right. Okay, let's shift to public safety and guns. It used to be that international security and international terrorism were in the headlines. Now today we see local terrorism in the headlines, shootings in our churches, shootings in our synagogues, and shootings in our schools. Again, in terms of your specific policies, what's in it for women and families with your gun policies?
Well, like most people in South Florida, I believe we should ban assault weapons and bump stocks and delay how a person and investigate them before they're allowed to buy guns. The Second Amendment allows people to bear arms, but it doesn't necessarily allow them to bear every arm. And assault weapons are weapons of war, and these should not be available, except for people in the military. And so we need, in 1994, I was part of the team that actually negotiated an assault weapons ban. For 10 years we had it. It really made a difference. We need to go back to that. That was a bipartisan bill. And so we need to go back to that. What does it mean for women? Listen, a child going to school ought not to fear that something's going to happen to them. It's important to everyone in this country that children have a childhood and that it's not a childhood that involves fear.
Right. Now, you're out in the community every day. What are the other things that you're hearing from women that you would, again, share with those who are listening in, watching into this live stream, that they just need to really hear from you, to believe in you, believe in Donna, believe in the Democrats, to provide a better today and a better tomorrow?
You know, only Democrats have fought for women's health. Only Democrats have understood the life of working women and understood that childcare has to be affordable and it has to be of very high quality. Republicans have simply rejected any kind of investments in child care, in people's salaries, in flexible work time, in paid family leave, all of the things that we think are important so that women can go to work and not worry about their children and share responsibility with their significant others. All of these things are in fact what the Democratic Party has stood for. And it's what I've worked for my entire career.
Right, and you have an esteemed career, and what we are seeing in the media, which unfortunately we come to expect, are negative ad campaigns. And we know there are some negative ad campaigns out about you now. And so I just want to give you the opportunity in this environment to have people understand what they hear, what is the truth, and again, why should they believe in Donna Shalala?
You know, of those lies, literally they're lies. They took snippets of headlines and made things up. If I wasn't a public figure, I would sue them for libel because none of it is accurate. And in fact, our polls show that the people of Miami don't believe it because they know me, and they've known me for years. Look, the issues are issues of women and families. They're issues of older women. This administration has announced that it's going to cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. The people that participate in those programs the most are women and their children, in some cases. There are more women in Social Security than men. There are more women in Medicare than men. And there are certainly more women and children in Medicaid than men. Those programs, the Republicans have already announced that they're going to cut. That's what this campaign's about. This campaign is about going forward, not backwards.
Right. And we know, and it's out in the media a lot, that again, these elections are also the most significant because it's about who is going to control the House and who is going to control the Senate after the election, and therefore who is the party whose values and policies are going to take the country forward, from immigration to health to guns and education, jobs, and the economy.
Exactly. And, you know, even when we have elected Republicans who had more moderate views, they couldn't get anything done in Washington because their party didn't believe in those views. So they would not schedule a vote on immigration reform or on or any of the other issues, on assault weapons ban, for example. Any of these things that people in South Florida care about. They're climate deniers. For us, that issue is life or death. So it does no good to elect someone that may have the same ideas or similar ideas if they can't get their party to schedule a vote on any of them and will not move forward. I believe the Republican Party has disrespected the people of South Florida consistently over time by rejecting the ideas of even the moderate legislators that we have sent to Washington. It's time for the Democrats to get a shot.
And so the way that that will happen, the way that anyone can express their voice is through their vote. That is ultimately what is going to determine the election, irrespective of polls, is who gets out to vote. We saw that with the governor race in Florida where, some were said to be ahead and it came down to voting day, and what made the difference is people getting out to vote. So early voting ends on Sunday. Ballots need to be to the election office by 7 p.m. on the eve of November 6th. So if you have ballots, please get them in the mail today. Please take advantage of early voting on Sunday. If you belong to a church, if you belong to a social club, if you belong to any kind of group, or if you just want to get your neighbors together, get to the polls together, because the only way that we can make a change is to make a change with our vote. So please get out to vote, irrespective of what you believe. Express your belief through your vote. So thank you, Donna Shalala,
thank you
so
very
much for this time.
Thank you very much.
And thanks to everyone for joining us. And again, vote November 6th. Thank you.